Hi there, and welcome to the HR Podcast. This is Linda Misegadis
and Cyndi Manuel, and we'll be your co-hosts. After spending years working in and with HR, we thought, why not start a podcast to support the important HR community? We believe the way things have always been done isn't necessarily what's going to work in the future. So we're diving into topics that support HR and working women as they navigate the future of work. We're talking about professional growth and also how we can support each other as human beings.
We can't wait to bring you insights from HR experts, thought leaders, and inspiring women who are making a real difference in their organization and communities. They'll share their journeys and tips on balancing work and life in a better way. We're excited to learn alongside you and hope you'll pick up some great takeaways from tips and tricks to worksheets that you can actually use in your daily life. So grab your favorite beverage
or lace up your walking shoes and join us for the HR Her Resources podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Her Resources podcast. I'm here with my co-host Cyndi Manuel. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. I'm glad it's Friday today.
Oh, me too.
How are you?
Well, we had a little crazy with Angus. We were at the emergency vet at 5 o'clock this morning. And so it was a little crazy. He's doing okay now, but they're like children, aren't
Our
they?
Our fur babies are our kids too.
Yep,
I would totally agree with that.
Yeah,
oh, man,
well,
I'm so sorry.
Well, honestly, after him having surgery, he's come back and done pretty well because he had nasal stenosis. He had a nose job. So now he has a nice, beautiful new nose. And he had the elongated soft palate surgery done. And so it's a little, it was a lot to go through. And he'd been doing pretty good, but he just had a little relapse this morning. But yeah, all things are good.
Remind me, how old is Angus, Linda?
He is 21 months, so not quite 2 years yet.
Okay.
So, yeah.
He's a toddler.
He is still our baby. I know we are so excited to be back in the studio with Hanaa Jimenez. She is the CEO of Gold Cardinal Consulting. And today we're going to be talking about redefining leadership in 2025 and also advocating for HR initiatives in Washington, D.C. So super excited about this. But I'm going to hand it over to you, Cyndi, to introduce our amazing guest.
Thank you so much. And I've had the pleasure of getting to work with Hanaa, so I know what an amazing professional, but also an amazing person she is. So as you mentioned, Linda, Dr. Hanaa Jimenez is the founder and CEO of Gold Cardinal Consulting. It's a woman-owned small business specializing in the intersection of people, change, and measurable impact. With over 15 years of expertise in human capital, DEI, leadership development, and change management, Hanaa is a recognized thought leader and award-winning strategist. She is passionate about creating actionable solutions that empower organizations to thrive by aligning leadership with business objectives and fostering equitable, human-centered workplaces. Hanaa holds a doctorate in transformational leadership. That speaks to my heart. She's an executive leadership certified from Harvard Kennedy School of Business, and as a certified change management professional. Her work has been featured in USA Today, and she's partnered with clients, both the federal government and commercial space, to design leadership programs and organizational transformation initiatives. Beyond her professional achievements, Hanaa is deeply committed to advocacy, serving on the Health and Human Resources Issues Committee for the National Small Business Association, which is awesome, where she helped shape policy priorities for small businesses nationwide. And originally, Hanaa was from the Washington, D.C. area, and today she is a Denver resident where she resides with her husband and 2 kiddos. She's a champion of continuous learning and believes in the power of authentic leadership to drive meaningful change in the workplace and beyond. My goodness. Welcome, Hanaa, to the Her Resources podcast.
Yes. What an incredible background.
Yeah. Anything you would add to that, Hanaa?
No, I think that you've covered it. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with you all today, and I'm really excited for our conversation.
Thank you so much. Well, as Linda said, there's a couple of things that we are focused on today. So The first one is really redefining leadership in 2025. So just very curious, when we say redefining leadership, what does that mean to you, Hanaa?
Yeah.
Thank you. So, really see redefining leadership as moving beyond some of the more traditional frameworks, traditional ways of working, skill building, and really looking ahead, embracing things like adaptability, which I think, if
Mm.
nothing else, over the past few years, we've all probably needed to be quite adaptable and flexible, as well as inclusivity and authenticity. Really, today's leaders are facing unprecedented challenges. They're navigating AI, machine learning, automation, and also managing very diverse and oftentimes hybrid teams, sometimes with limited resources. So these demands really necessitate shifting towards leadership more focused on trust, cultural competency and understanding, and also really being able to foster innovation within teams while guiding them through times that can often feel very uncertain or a little scary, changes. And so I really see authenticity and integrity as being those ultimate differentiators where leaders can build that trust, inspire collaboration, and also drive meaningful and lasting impact within their teams.
Mm.
No, I wonder, can you elaborate a little bit on, like, when we think about leadership, I think there are multiple tiers of leadership. And I think that's sometimes where the challenge with even some of the things you were just talking about there, right? Because at your C-suite level, and then you have those middle managers, and the real trust and relationship is at the middle level,
With
right?
them.
Because
Mhm.
unfortunately for your C-suite, they're the ones who have to deliver the hard messages. They're the ones who can sometimes even be demonized in corporations, right? Because we're going to blame everything on the C-suite. And so talk a little bit about that, but then maybe even how those two levels can work together to help ensure though that you're not also creating an us versus them environment.
Great question.
It's an excellent question. Thank you for bringing that up. So, in terms of really how those two levels can work together, I think there's, especially at that middle level, a lot of managing down and managing up that needs to happen. So,
Right.
things, connecting with your team, if you are more of a middle level manager, making sure that you're staying connected with your team, but then also as you're connecting with the C suite, sharing all of the great work that your team is doing, giving them shout outs, just really in an organic way. So it doesn't necessarily need to be in a town hall, but just really kind of sharing all of the wonderful things that your team's doing, as well as some of the questions or challenges that they might be encountering. So I think a
Mm.
lot of times we're in a very interesting time where we do have AI coming to the forefront, and I think AI is really critical for um, more, productivity. Kind of, it's a great tool, but it cannot replace those human interactions and staying connected. And so I
I
think
agree.
just really being that bridge between your team and C-suite, managing up and sharing what's happening at that team level is critical. And then I think also cascading that down to your team, um, from, hey, here's what, so and so shared with me when we met the other day. Just providing transparency and communication in that way too, I think is really key.
Mm. And I think sometimes, and I've said this on other episodes, I think there's an expectation that you get promoted into a leadership role. And Linda, back to your great point, leaders at different levels, right? So somebody is an awesome individual contributor. Let's make them a manager. And then let's expect them to have a cape, be a super person, and not need any kind of background or training or support. And I'm totally over exaggerating. But from an HR perspective, what can we do from an HR perspective to really kind of help support leaders as they move into those positions and become those redefined leaders?
That's an excellent question. So, from an HR perspective, And I think you're absolutely right. I don't think it was excessive at all. If that was the word that you used, I think that is oftentimes the case, especially with just how fast things seem to be moving. Um,
Yes.
Oftentimes, folks are promoted and they don't necessarily have the foundation or the support as they're transitioning into that new role to really feel confident and successful. And so, from an HR perspective, I think making sure that you are staying connected to that leader to understand what they need as an individual is really critical. I think also ensuring some strategic alignment. So when it comes to considering
Mm.
the goals of the company, and then also figuring out from there, working backwards, what are the specific skills that a leader might need to develop, to work on in order to help achieve those goals and bring that impact is really critical because it could vary. That could be focusing on things like coaching. It could also be focusing more so on skill sets around how to build collaboration across remote teams. Um, and then also, another big piece is making sure that that leadership development and support is relevant, practical, and that they have the opportunity to apply it in their day to day so that it's not
Mm.
necessarily
Yep.
a one and done, we gave them a list of LinkedIn learning courses or we sent them
Check,
to this
check,
3 day.
check. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. It's truly, how are you integrating this in your conversations with your team in your day to day? How did that go? Having some reflection built in as well.
Mm.
And then
Yep.
also, I think that there's, as you mentioned earlier, I'm a big fan of continuous learning. I think also peer to peer learning. So that social and collaborative learning piece, where leaders are learning so much from one another, really creates the opportunity for them to share ideas, test strategies, and just learn together and grow is really critical. So um, that's my perspective on it.
So if I was going to take kind of three things away from what you just said, Hanaa, and please feel free to say, and you missed this, Cyndi, because that could have happened because there was so much good stuff that you just said there. So what I heard was continuous learning, right? You're never done. It's not a check the box. Also, Hanaa is different from Cyndi, is different from Linda. So we each need personalized learning and development because I might be really good at one thing and maybe not so good at another thing. And then the peer-to-peer. So, if I am not maybe as good at something, that's okay because my buddy over here, Hanaa, or my friend Linda is strong in that area. So the alignment with other leaders, the peer-to-peer support. Linda, are there any other kind of things that you kind of picked up on there as well?
Yeah, no, I think you hit all the points. I mean, it's just so important. But I think that, you really kind of highlighted some of the criticality behind those pieces.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, good stuff, Hanaa.
Yeah, it's really good. Well, and and I think that's always the difficult role. And Cyndi and I talk about this all the time is how much of a role does HR play in driving leadership? And I'm curious, Hanaa, what are your thoughts on? So sometimes it's hard to think about how do we get our leaders to take that training. So like I agree
Mm.
with you on the checklist, like Cyndi was talking about, because there is some of that. It's like, here's your training. And that's great for things like harassment or, some of those, it's like things you have to
Have
take.
to.
But
Mhm.
yeah, but when you think about those developmental opportunities, how can you maybe like help guide and direct, but also maybe recognize maybe that's when you are able to do a little sorting to find out like who really is interested in growing in their leadership and maybe who's somebody we should be looking at and asking some different questions. Not that they should be gone, but that we should ask them different questions because maybe leadership isn't really their career path.
Mm.
That's such an excellent right. And I think there's a really clear distinction too between leadership and management, right? And I think that's the other piece. And oftentimes you have employees who maybe they have tenure with the company, they've got the years, the experience, but they could have zero interest in leading a team, right? would much, more prefer to focus on kind of their passion area, what they really enjoy doing day to day. And that may
Yes.
not be
Yeah.
necessarily leading the team. So I think having those regular one-on-ones and just having those conversations, asking what is it that's important to that particular employee? What is it that they are wanting to accomplish or interested in? And then really going from there. And as far as training as well, I think part of that conversation, and this is a bit of the change management lens, but we always say that folks typically have like one radio station that they listen to, and that's what's in it for me, WIFM, right? And
Yeah.
so, so I think
Yep.
it's really having that connection with that particular leader or employee, and just talking through what, if it's this training or sometimes it might be shadowing or mentorship, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
Here's really the impact and the benefit that's going to bring to you, to your team, how it's going to help you. So helping them clearly see that connection as well, because it is also oftentimes an investment of time. As we said a little
Yeah.
earlier, time resources can be quite limited. So I think it's really critical.
Yeah. You know what I love that Hanaa said and all of that, Cyndi? Like the one thing that just like tuned in on me was talk to the people. Like
Right?
how many
Have a
times are
conversation.
decisions made,
Yeah.
yeah, for or about or around you without actually talking to you. And I think that
Yes.
happens so often. And so we make these broad-based assumptions that, if this person, to your point, Cyndi, if they're really great at their jobs, like let's promote them and that I'm doing something great for you without maybe having that conversation with you. And then as the employee, what ends up happening sometimes in those situations is then you feel a little pressured, right? Because you're like, well, if I don't take this
Oh,
promotion,
yeah.
have I now limited my growth opportunity? Have I limited my earning opportunity? And is management my only way to enhance both of those areas, right? So I loved what you said there.
Yeah.
It's about having conversations because it's amazing to me how so often that's the piece that's missing is the communication aspect.
And what I would add to that too, I think that's a great call out. And what I would add is, we also have to know that just because somebody is moved into the role, it going back to it puts pressure on them, right? The mindset sometimes is, ooh, I've been promoted, so I better like get in there and like start knocking it out and start doing what needs to be done without asking for help, without holding up the white
Yes.
flag, without back to what you were saying, Hanaa, without looking for mentors or other peers who
Mhm.
can sort of, collaborate with me. I have to know it all. I have to do it all. I mean, I'll just share this with, from my own experience. Years ago, when I moved into a manager role, I thought, oh my gosh, I got to know it all now. And, imposter syndrome and perfectionism, all those things, which is another episode.
Yeah,
But, it kind of goes back to the importance of redefining leadership as we move forward.
absolutely. No, I love that. Wait, it just kind of brought it all full circle, right? And what
Mhm.
Hannah is talking about is
Yeah.
really kind of taking that time to look at that and
Yeah.
looking at out beyond just the technical skills, right? Because that's also where you look at the difference between leadership and management and then individual contributors is like what are the skills necessary in each of those different
Right.
functions and roles, right?
Mhm.
So no, I love that. Well, let's transition a little bit into advocating for HR in Washington, D.C., because Cyndi and I obviously are big advocates for the role of human resources. We've been really trying to, as part of our podcast, is to elevate that role as well out there. And so, why do you think that advocacy matters and why is it needed in HR today?
Absolutely. So, and actually, I think building on the idea and the importance of conversations, right, and having a voice,
Mhm.
and so I
Yes.
really see advocacy as so important in HR because the policies that we're fighting for, that we're looking at, are really directly impacting our people, our employees, our organizations, and our communities overall. And so, if we really think about it, HR is at that core, that intersection of business and people. And so I think
Mhm.
as HR, professionals, we're really uniquely positioned to influence change and to bring that impact that we're seeking. So it might be advocating for fair labor laws, workforce development initiatives, or maybe equitable hiring practices. But HR professionals really have what I see as a wonderful opportunity to make sure that the voices of the workforce are heard and represented. And so that's really how I see advocacy as being that voice for some of those critical issues, things like healthcare access, workplace flexibility, that might otherwise not necessarily get the attention that they deserve for our people.
And I know you and I had a conversation recently, Hanaa, about your, some people had talked to you about going to DC to do some advocacy. And so what kind of helped you to make that decision that, I do want to be a voice? Because again, a lot of pressure, but it's such a meaningful, such a meaningful trip for you to go and to speak on behalf of all of us. So what helped you make that decision?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So I really, especially over the last several years, just as I've grown, I think professionally matured, and age matured just through like having, children and everything. I just really more and more have just seen your children, your team, your community, your peers, they will oftentimes believe more what you do, not necessarily always what you say. And so I really felt like I was at the crux of I need to take action. And if I feel so strongly about some of these core issues, it's the what's the saying, like if not me, then who, and so it was
Yes.
just somewhat of a like the opportunity presented itself, and I decided, I think that it's the time, right, for me to take that up and to go and share my perspective and kind of see what happens from there. But at least I can kind of share my voice and have that heard. So,
Thank you for doing that, by the way. And are
Yeah.
there some things we can do in our own communities from an HR perspective, or just to back to what you were just saying, have your voice heard?
Yeah. Great question, Cyndi.
What are some things that we could do? Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So I really think it's great to start small, but start somewhere, right? And so
Love that.
there are local town halls and community forums that a lot of workforce related topics are oftentimes discussed. You can also join Chamber of Commerce or professional associations. A lot of times they'll have local chapters to really stay plugged into what's happening within your area. And then on a kind of a different lens too, you could also write letters to your representatives. They are open even to invitations to visit your place. So they will sometimes come if you write to them. And it helps to personalize those issues too that you care about and really give them that real world context too. So those are some key recommendations I would.
I love that. And Linda, you're so heavily involved in the public sector with UKG. Do you have additional kind of insight, or I know you've had some exposure to some pretty cool people and events and things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with everything that Hanaa was saying there. And then also, it's like making sure your voice is heard. One of my favorite people that I love to watch is Michaela Geronimo with she is the chief HR officer for the state of Washington. And she's a huge advocate, and really speaking out around equity, inclusion, and belonging. It's been a big focus of hers and the things that she talks about. And, going up and having those conversations with her representatives, exactly what Hanaa was talking about is like having those, because you're in a unique position to have those conversations, especially when you're an HR professional in the public sector, because you have direct access to some of those policy and decision makers, which can impact all of the workforce, not just government workforce. I think it can really make a big impact, and is a great opportunity for government to lead the way, right? How great is it if government HR professionals are leading the way instead of it always coming out of the private sector? It's
Yes.
great when it can come out of the public sector. So,
I love that. So I have a question for both of you. So first you, Hanaa, what is one leadership lesson that you have learned along your journey?
So I'd say one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is really on the importance of trust and authenticity. So for me, early on, similar to what we were sharing earlier, I thought that being a leader meant that you always had the right answers, that were most in control, right? You had everything
The cape.
kind of
Yeah.
figured
yeah.
out. Yeah, exactly. It's like magic, right? Um, and and then over time, I really realized that true leadership is really about showing up as yourself and being honest about the challenges that might lie ahead, and then also creating an environment for others who so they feel empowered to really contribute their best ideas too. So not necessarily having things be perfection,
Love
but
that.
more around connection. So yeah.
Like
Perfect. I
that.
love
That's
that.
really
Linda, how
good.
about you? What's a leadership lesson you've learned?
Probably don't sweat the small stuff, because I think, I used to really get hung up on one being perfect, and then also, making sure that because I felt like my team was a reflection of me, and that if we made a mistake, it's like, oh my goodness, and everybody makes mistakes, and it's about owning those mistakes and just stepping up and saying, yep, we made a mistake, and here's what we're doing, and here's how we're going to fix it. I don't, you don't have to get though. Literally, the world would not stop turning on its axis if you make a mistake, or that maybe you don't get that one task done or something like that, or you don't answer that one email. And that's been something that I've really tried to incorporate into
Yeah.
my leadership style. Is like, don't sweat the small stuff all the time, because I spent too much time doing that, I think so.
I love that. And Linda, I don't know if you remember back at DIA when you and I, Denver International Airport, when you and I were doing the transformation from paper and Post-its to Kronos back in 2005, 2006,
Yeah.
2007. We had gone to Denver International Airport and we met a gentleman named Ken Green, and he was the leader at Denver International Airport. He had been in one of the buildings on 9/11. And for a good 4 hours or so, his family did not know what had happened to him. We'll just say that. And so he, each year then, after that, he moved to Denver, went to DIA, and each year after that on 9/11, he would do a talk called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. So I think it's a great lesson that you're talking about there, Linda.
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep in perspective, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Around that.
Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Let LJM Productions help you sound your best. We specialize in podcast editing, production, audio restoration, and mixing, ensuring every episode is polished, professional, and ready to wow your audience. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned podcaster, we'll handle the technical details so you can focus on sharing your voice. Partner with LJM Productions today and hear the difference. Reach out to ljmproductionsco@gmail.com for a free quote.
And now I'm kind of curious, and this I'll pose back to both of you, honestly, because you're both small business owners. And sometimes there's the balance between pushing for policy and things that are good for employees, but they aren't always necessarily good for small businesses because of funding, or, so we do great for your employees. You want to be able to do all of those things, but they don't necessarily fit. So talk a little bit about finding the balance between all of that, because we need our small businesses out there, but you're not always going to be able to do the same thing that the big businesses are. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think it is oftentimes a fine balance, right? And so some of the issues, the priority issues that we'll be talking through at the Small Business Congress in a couple of weeks, we'll focus on that. So it is really, I think, being clear on what constitutes a big business and then a small business, and
Yeah.
what are some of those
Yeah.
differentiators, right? When it comes to even things like taxes, right? How much are you taxed? What
Mhm.
types of
Yeah.
I think also what types of autonomy or say do you have as a small business
Mhm.
owner in some of the benefits, for example, paid leave, things like that, that you might be providing to your employees versus a larger
Right.
corporation. So I think that is really key. Is just really focusing on what are some of those key differentiators, and then also um, what is a long-term strategy versus a short-term strategy in
Mhm.
some of these cases too, because as a small business owner, it might be a bit more costly or difficult upfront, but from a long-term strategy perspective, it certainly pays off in dividends in a variety of ways. So I think just really not taking a one size fits all, if you will, and trying to think through all
Yeah.
of the
Yes.
different possible.
Yeah, I like that. What about for you, Cindy? Because I know like employee engagement and those things are really important to you as
They
well. And
are.
so thinking about how do you find the balance in all of that, and making sure that you want to provide the best opportunity, but you also have to, you're a small business. So,
I have
so what are your thoughts on
limitations.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I would sort of even go through the lens of a small business and women-owned small business. So,
Yeah, yeah.
it is challenging, and I've worked historically for large businesses or larger
Hmm.
businesses, all the way up to very large businesses. And that's part of the reason why I love getting to be a small business, because it does feel so much more personal. So what I
Yeah.
find is, working for a small business, it's maybe less about the Maslow's hierarchy kinds of things, right? And it's more, I have a passion for this. I see Cyndi has a passion for this. I see she wants my input. She's a newer business. She's only 3 years old. So she's still wanting to hear my input. And Hanaa, you're 4 years old. You just celebrated your 4-year birthday. So
Yay,
congratulations.
congratulations.
But I
Yeah.
think when you're smaller, people have more of a voice. And, like you can bring in interns and you can bring in independent consultants for projects and things like that. So the workforce even looks a bit different. Um, so yeah, I think, thank goodness for things like the Small Business Association and things of
Mhm.
that, and coming from an HR background. So I think I'm a benefactor of what I learned in large business. I just can't always do all the benefits and things like that
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
a larger business can do. Yeah.
No, that's a great answer, for sure.
Thank you. So, Hanaa, I also wanted to just carve out just a little bit of time going back to leadership. You recently launched this year a new leadership newsletter. And
Oh,
so I'd
awesome.
love for you to, or maybe it's more of a blog. You describe it. I don't want to take words out of your mouth. So, but can you share with our community what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And you had it exactly right. So it is a newsletter, and so it's called the Conscious Leadership Weekly, and so it's a newsletter that comes out every Monday, and it is for leaders in any industry. You can be a small business owner, you might be a leader in another organization, leaders in the community, and I think also leaders in our homes, right? So I really am an
Mm.
advocate of leadership is not necessarily always a title, but it's something that we all do. It's a
Yeah.
verb, right? And so
Nice.
our newsletter focuses on how to lead authentic to who you are. So lots of self awareness. We pull in a lot of
Love that.
emotional intelligence, and um, the big piece is also just taking action. So it's really small, bite sized actionable recommendations that our readers can take each week, and building on a community together. I think that's definitely something as we look ahead to 2025 and beyond. just really nourishing and building our community together and supporting one another. So yes, very excited
That's
for
awesome.
Yeah.
If people want to sign up for that newsletter, how do they go about doing that, Hanaa? And other ways to reach out to you too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I can be found on social media. So my Instagram handle is at Gold Cardinal Consulting. And then I also, our newsletter, we do have a direct link that I can provide you all, but I'm
Yeah.
happy to
Put it
share
in the
that.
show
And folks
notes for
can,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, just provide their contact information, subscribe, and they should be good to go from there on out.
I'm a
I like
subscriber,
that.
and I'll say the first edition was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I will definitely be a subscriber after today for sure. So
And it
I'm
is
really looking forward
bite-sized.
to that.
Yeah.
Which is great. I think that's so
Yes,
important, right? People can only consume small bits of information these days
that's
because
right.
they're on overload. So it's like great to just make that consumable. So wonderful. That's very exciting. I know. What would you like to leave our listeners with as far as like advice and guidance from leadership to advocating to just to small business? Like, what would you like to kind of leave all of our listeners with today?
I'd say just really from all of those lenses, focus on just understanding what's important to you, right? And tuning into that and what feels right from a values perspective. What is it that you believe in? And then how does that show up? Because I think for some folks, it might be, advocating from like a policy perspective. And then in other
Hmm.
cases, it might be how you're engaging maybe with your team members in the next meeting, right? But really checking in with yourself to kind of see how you're feeling as far as how you're showing up from authentic to who you are and what's important to you. And then kind of going from there.
I like that.
Put on your oxygen mask first, right, Hanaa?
That
Yes, exactly.
that's
Exactly.
right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for spending time today with Linda
Yeah,
and me. It's been a joy to get to see you and hear about all the great things that you're doing, and just continued success to you as well, Hanaa.
yeah, absolutely. And one thing we didn't ask you, give everybody just a little tidbit of what your organization
Great
does, so
question.
that
Great question.
we usually
Yes.
try to factor that in. And so yeah, tell everybody a little bit about what Gold Cardinal Consulting does.
Sure. Thank you. So we provide what we say the people side of business. So we really focus on helping organizations meet their business objectives through helping their people to thrive. So that oftentimes can be change management, leadership development, strategic planning, but really taking all of those bits and pieces and coming up with a good plan and then implementing it for how we can help the people within the organization to really come alongside of the company and have everyone make that impact together. So those are
I
a
like
couple of
that.
the key services. Yeah. We do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I think we will definitely put your organization's link out there as
Absolutely.
well, so that anybody who's looking for some consulting, they can definitely reach out and get in touch with you. And we look forward to watching all the amazing things that you're out there doing. And if there's anything that we can do to help support you in your efforts around advocacy and leadership, where we want this to be a platform for you as well. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for another incredible episode where Cyndi and I are so lucky to have the opportunity to talk with such incredible people like Hanaa. And so we hope you all enjoyed our episode today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the HR Her Resources podcast. We're so happy to have you with us on this journey. Music and production by Logan Misegadis of LJM Productions. We'd also like to thank our intern, Lauren Banis, for creating our logo and supporting our social media postings. If you'd like to connect with Logan or Lauren, you can find their information in the show notes. If you found value in our discussion and think someone else might as well, please follow and subscribe to our LinkedIn and share with a friend. Until our next episode, please take care and continue to support one another.